Very welcome along to the Matchbook NFL podcast. We cannot believe it's week 16 already, 3 weeks left of the regular season, straight into playoffs. Before you know it, it'll all be over, but we've got so much football to come before that. And we've also got a busy Christmas schedule to come too. And before we get going and before I throw to Judah and Doug, stay tuned on the Matchbook social channels for our Christmas podcast. We're looking at around the same time Monday, so she'll be in your feeds. That's the 23rd, or in your podcast feeds, that is. She'll be in and around the Monday 23rd, concentrating on those 2 Christmas Day games and a couple of Saturday games as well. But lads, week 15 takeaways. Judah, I mean, I was only thinking there in a bit of prep for this show how open. I know we talked about this in spurts every week, but it is going to be an open Super Bowl. Those couple of Lions injuries, maybe bringing them back to the pack. It just feels that there's so many unknowns that we're going to eventually find the answer to over the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think it's just like there's almost like a new team every week that gets toppled, and it's like, oh, the Lions are the class of the NFL. They've won 11 straight. They're clearly the best team. A lot of people on them, as favorites against the Bills, and they lose, and it's like, wait, now who's the next team? Obviously, they're dealing with a lot of injuries, but I think it just points to exactly what you're talking about of like, this is a wide open race right now. And I think the Bills are now this kind of new team, but like they're obviously not without faults. They've given up like 80 points in the last couple of weeks. That's not exactly a recipe for success. And I think it's just going to make for such a compelling, even last few weeks, because seeding is going to be so important for especially in the NFC now, where it's like the Eagles and Lions vying for that number 1 seed. Like it's a huge race to monitor at the end of the season. And then come playoff time, I think this is among the best. Usually you have teams that kind of sneak in there, right? Like the Steelers would sneak in as a 7 seed and be 13-point underdogs against the Chiefs or the Bills. I don't think we have that to the same extent this year. And it seems like there's a lot of teams who really have legitimate cases to be Super Bowl contenders, which is a lot of fun and something that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, Judah, further to your point, I mean, you've got almost like a top 5 in the NFL at the moment. So Bills 5.1, Super Bowl, Eagles 5.9, Chiefs 6.6, Lions 7.6, Ravens 9.8. You've almost got the Packers and Vikings sitting there 16.0 and 19.0 respectively, asking for your money. And then 4 teams in that 38 to 44 band. But just so you know, for the listener and viewers, Rams, Bucks, Texans, Steelers, out of all those teams, the winner's probably going to come from them, albeit maybe Chargers, Commanders might have something to say. Any team you're looking at when I read those prices out that you think keep an eye on this team over the next few weeks?
I think the Bucks are sneaky. This is an offense which, like, through thick and thin, has been basically top 5 this season. They've dealt with a lot of injuries, and I think they are able to win in a bunch of different ways. They can run the ball very effectively. Baker Mayfield's been passing the ball great, and what's really kind of the main difference, I think, is they've changed their defensive style to just like all out blitzes. They were like 40% for most of the season. The last month has been like 65%. And that's just caused all sorts of chaos, and their defensive efficiency has improved dramatically. Granted, it hasn't been the toughest slate of opponents, but can't exactly punish for that sort of thing. And a lot of these offensive lines have still been good. And it's, again, we're not talking about kind of what's most likely to happen here. We're talking about if everything goes right. What's the ceiling? And I think this is a top 5 offense and a defense that can cause some problems.
Okay, keep an eye on that, just so you know, out of interest, 40.0 currently for the Super Bowl, and you can, of course, look at all those other markets as well. Doug, I mean, same question to you, but more so maybe if you want to take it on the openness of the next few weeks, because there's a lot of questions here we don't quite have the answer to yet.
Yeah, I think Judah nailed the openness, and the case in point, the Chiefs are 13-1, have the face of the league and arguably the best player, and they're not the favorite. They're like the 4th or 5th favorite, right? That just speaks to every team having its imperfections. And we've talked about this in college football, where in years past, it was a foregone conclusion that 2 or 3 teams that had a chance, and there was always like a 4th team that didn't really belong in the playoff, let alone 12. But now it's wide open. And we're seeing that with the NFL this particular season. There's not these dominant teams. Like, the records are certainly impressive for a couple teams. There's no doubt. But we know those teams are either beatable or there's other teams on their tier that make the path, the combined win probability of a playoff run, have a little bit loftier odds than we are accustomed to. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it pans out, particularly the NFC. I think the NFC has really widened the last couple of weeks. Yes, the Eagles have won 10 straight, but we kind of know that some of those were really soft opponents, but give them credit because you got to win. Not everyone does. But also the Lions just mounting injuries. I mean, 22 lost to IR is just an absurd number. And they have this wild card of a coach in a lot of ways. And then other teams are making noise. I agree that Tampa has been fantastic on turf. And they showed that last week. And we also have teams like the Rams who aren't quite dead. I mean, we all know they're like in the division, but like in terms of big picture, like they could make a run. Probably not 3 games because they got destroyed on their home field by Philly, but their defense is that bad. But like they could be a disruptor for sure. In at least in 1 game or something like that. And they're going to host a playoff game if they win the division. So that starts right there as well. And maybe it's the Vikings, maybe whatever. But the Vikings are legitimate. And so I'm really excited about the NFC. The AFC, we kind of know it's top heavy. I don't think the bottom teams are have much of a chance. Like I don't think the Broncos and Steelers and Texans can win 3 straight games. But I don't know how the top's going to unfold. So I'm really excited for that, for sure.
Yeah, very, very open season. And briefly, Doug, on last week, but maybe just in general, sometimes things seem obvious after they happen, but it's maybe as a better trying to get that, encapsulate that before, obviously, we were betting. But you have regrets on not going for the Vikings.
I do, because we have to understand what the market is and how stubborn it is. So in college, generally speaking, of course, you'll see teams move a couple. Move like 4 points. You'll see that. But you rarely see that in NFL because there's just such a stubbornness to the market. There's buyback, and we don't see things that would be blowouts move much. And sometimes it just reeks of a blowout. And that is something that I should have picked up on with the Vikings and Bears, but you just get so scared when it's like, oh, all this sharp money on the Bears. And you have to respect the market. You have to respect the sharp money because the odds makers do. And they're telling you they win long term, and you have to be careful there. But sometimes you just have to trust your instincts. Like, they're not right all the time. The gap in the percentages is a gap, but it's not insurmountable for a 1-game situation. So trust your instincts in a lot of ways. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, Jude, I actually just want to bring you in finally before we get going this week. There's just so much to talk about. But on Doug's point there, it's something you do, I guess, in tackling the tops and tails of these markets. But on the market itself, I mean, I have a theory in horse racing, which is more relevant to our UK and Irish listeners, that a tipster will put up a horse, and that horse will shorten purely off the back of being tipped there. Therefore, I think the market's very artificial in that sense. The NFL is, I would say, the opposite of that, and it's very stringent. But is it always correct, or do you have to very least respect it, obviously, but is it always 100% correct?
Well, no, right? It's not some source of truth, right? There's a difference, kind of, as you said, of like ignoring the market. That is not wise. And I think there's a lot of respect, but especially in looking to futures markets in particular, like, we're going to learn a lot about these teams, right? NFL teams are not static. Things are not the same. It's if it were just 4 weeks into the season and we had all the information that we know, and like teams are going to remain the same, then it would be a very easy game. But that's not how it goes. And things change, teams change. Football is a game of push and pull. There's a lot of schematic elements that are constantly at odds with each other. So look, I think it is, we're going to learn a lot. That's really what it comes down to. And I think a lot of the narratives that form, kind of like, it is one thing to go through the grind of a regular season. I think the Chiefs are like a real great example of this, where like it's a pretty obvious to an observer, and it shows up in the data of like the Chiefs are going to play different come playoff time than they will in the regular season, right? They have a kind of a lot more to lose in the regular season, and they turn it up. And I think that is true to some extent of every team. So I guess to kind of bring it to one point, it's like the market is more efficient, I think, than any one individual, but like if we were going to recreate that market after the playoffs started, it's not going to look the same. So it's not true in that sense. It's just probably a better source than any one individual can do on their own.
Yeah, it's almost working with the market and using that as your starting point and then going from there. But fascinating insight from the guys. They're both on the open NFL season coming up, but also a little bit on the NFL markets themselves, game by game and team ratings, etc. Before we get going, three things. Firstly, Matchbook Insights, your one-stop shop for all betting throughout the Christmas period, but can, of course, check out the NFL picks from Judah and Doug throughout. So do check that out. Just go to insights.matchbook.com and search Matchbook Insights, a YouTube channel. All you have to do is hit that like button, subscribe completely for free. Your best way of keeping up to date when a new show lands in all sports. And do check out the Matchbook Betting Exchange for your NFL bettors. If you're doing singles, you will get the best price, best built in, and very little to no around 100% majority of games. But if you do want to do that bet builder of a sportsbook, you can of course do that on Matchbook as well. A lot to cover. Texans, Chiefs, Steelers, Ravens, Eagles, Commanders, Vikings, Seahawks, Niners, Dolphins, any other bets, long shots, and best bets. Check out the description in the YouTube comment or YouTube description now for timestamps. But we'll start with the Texans at the Chiefs and take a look at the betting that we currently have on matchbook.com. You can back Texans 238 on the money line, the Chiefs 167. The point spread sees Texans get a 3-point head start at 189. The total for this game currently stands at 41.5. And the under is marginal favorite at 193. Judah, Patrick Mahomes, they're going to take it game by game. They do have, I think, 3 games in 11 days, just given the schedule. These 4 teams we're about to talk about here have all sort of been shafted in some way with the schedule for Christmas Day purposes. But yeah, is Mahomes 100%? Probably not, but is he going to definitely play all of this game?
Yeah, I think he is going to play. But I still like the Texans here. I think this is a defense that has been great and matches up particularly well with the Chiefs, especially as Mahomes has struggled in his sack avoidance all season. I think that's probably only going to get worse as he's playing on a kind of hobbled ankle. But the Texans have been top 5 against both the pass and the run for a while, and the Chiefs offense started the season as this real they're great success rate, number 1 in the NFL, running the ball very effectively. That has not been their offense the last 7 weeks of the season almost, though I think that reputation has kind of carried from earlier in the season, where they're kind of like a 10 to 15 offense. But just to say in this spot, I don't think that much differentiates these two teams. Obviously, the quarterback and Mahomes magic is a real phenomenon, but just from how these teams have performed, I don't think there's such a massive gap on offense. And the Chiefs' pass defense has been a unit I've been wanting to attack for a long time. This is since Jalen Watson went down, it's been really bad. And the weather game in Cleveland with Winston was basically their first good performance in 7 weeks. And I don't think that's a function of the Chiefs are back. But I do think this is a spot where the Texans have struggled on offense. They're not healthy on the offensive line right now. But they are still, I have not, maybe I'm the last one. I have not completely lost hope on Stroud and this offense. And I think that in a spot against a pretty vulnerable Kansas City team, they can have some offensive success. And just kind of the base rate here of a hobbled Mahomes still getting a lot of credit, though I think that the offenses are pretty much the same and the Texans defense is much, much better, leads to some value on Houston.
Okay, and of course, attacking the money line there, just what we talked about at the top of the show with tails, albeit a slight one here, but money line is plus money, big plus money at 238. Doug, have you sort of given up on the Texans offense and Stroud?
Yeah, I'm done with them. I think they are a shell of themselves. In a lot of ways, you should throw out their performances without Nico Collins and everything, but still, I've just been so soured on them. And I actually like the under in this game. 41.5 is not a big number, but it's the Chiefs, and that's what they do. And I just don't see how Houston sort of breaks out in this game against this. Stroud just hasn't been the same this year for whatever reasons, with or without Nico Collins. Yeah, he's had some nice games, but this is going to be cold weather. The Chiefs defend the run really well. I think we're going to have a similar game like we did last week with the Chiefs and Browns. And I would grab the 2.5 right now. This market's been really weird. It was 2.5 in favor of Houston early. Many thought Chiefs don't need this game. They need Christmas. Like, they're not going to mess around with Mahomes because they're playing the long game. And it didn't feel right. Like the social media doctors were like, it looks like he's going to play. Like, that's not that bad of an injury. Should have grabbed the +2.5. Really sharp friend of mine did grab it Sunday night. He just thought it was a bad number. I think 2.5. I think this goes to 3. Now, Judah can sort of represent the contingent that does move the market a lot more. Will there just be automatic buyback on +3? But I think there's some line value in my eyes at -2.5. I don't think Houston is that impressive. I actually think the Chiefs. So this is where I gamble and like arbitrage. I like to set up middles, particularly in the NBA, because it's more predictable. But like, I just don't see the Texans going wire to wire in this game in dominating fashion. Now, famous last words, but I think the Chiefs will be on point here. So I would lay the 2.5 for a big position and play back in the game +4.5, 6.5, things like that. I just think 2.5 is a cheap price, and I also think it'll move between now and kickoff.
Okay, Doug wants to get the Chiefs on a cheap price there, which is -2.5 in his opinion at 186. Does lean to the under, by the way. That's 41.5 currently at 193 if you do want to play the total. But Judah does think that ceiling is quite high with Stroud and his offense, and is going Houston moneyline 238. So none the wiser I am after those opinions. Hopefully the listener viewers has been stirred one way or another, but it's getting serious football time, so plenty of strong opinions here. Looking forward to the next game, which is Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. The Steelers 365 on the money line. The market really fancying the Ravens here at 137. The point spread would see Steelers get a 6-point head start, and 44.5 is the total. I mean, Doug, you're for a bet here, not quite there for a bet, but you are leaning the Ravens. You would lay the points if you had to have a bet here, -6.
Yeah, you want to be careful reacting too much to the Steelers' last game. So much of their offense and defense is influenced by Pickens and Watt, right? But all signs do point to both those guys playing this weekend. So that is a key component for me. And for whatever reason, I've been on the Ravens against the Steelers over the years, and they just bit me. I'm not taking the Steelers, even though Tomlin now 5-1 outright this season in the underdog role. Pickens, they're way different. He's such a big part of their big chunk plays, especially with Russell Wilson at quarterback. You know the market. You already know. We already have details of the market. It got to +7. That was taken out right away. So there's some sharp books at 6.5, some at 6. 7 there'll be some buyback at 7. There just will be. So we're down between 6.5 and 6. So if you like the Steelers, I would wait, because I think the line can only go down from 6.5, knowing that there's been buyback at 7. And if Pickens is officially ruled in, I think it goes to 6, maybe 5.5. I don't know enough. I don't have a model in front of me, but there's no need to bet it now. But I lean right now to the Ravens, because I just think their upside and explosiveness is just there. And, this is the gauntlet we all worried about the Steelers at the beginning of the season. And I wouldn't lay 7, though. I do agree with the 7's too much, in this. Baltimore looked great, obviously, last week in a lot of ways because they played the Giants, but this is still a slobber knocker rock fight of a game that could come down to a field.
Okay, we will skip ahead. I know Judah doesn't have any strong opinion here, so I'll get his thoughts on Eagles at Commanders. But Doug leaning to Ravens if you get 6, not interested if it does go to that touchdown at 7. Eagles at Commanders. I mean, currently on the money line, Eagles bit of movement in the market as we're watching this live on YouTube Wednesday afternoon. But Eagles 161 on the money line to the Commanders, who've been nibbled in a bit at 252. The Commanders still getting a 3-point head start at 202, and 45 is the total. I mean, Washington are your team, Judah. When we spoke properly, I guess, last about the Commanders 4 or 5 weeks ago, in depth, that is. I mean, take it maybe 4 or 5 weeks later for maybe a report on where we're at. The Commanders, are they starting to get their mojo back a little bit?
I think so. I mean, I've tempered the excitement that I had for them earlier in the season. I'm just generally, I should say, I think Jaden Daniels is a lot healthier post-bye. He's running a lot more often, which I think is kind of a good indicator. I mean, we don't have a huge sample of that, but if you kind of track his scramble rate from pre-rib injury to post-rib injury to now what we've seen and even what we saw last week, this is a guy who's running more. And I think that's it's certainly going to help this offense, and also points to just his general health. So obviously I'm not a doctor. look, this is a team that underperformed the final scoreboard in New Orleans, but it was a game they controlled throughout. I mean, Jaden Daniels missed Terry McLaurin on 3 touchdowns by an inch either way. Like, I don't think those are the sorts of things that repeat itself, or I should say the more signal is the getting open for 3 potential long touchdowns rather than just missing on all those. I think this is a defense that's improved. That much I don't think has changed. And an offense that has some serious potential, and not even just potential, but is like still one of the best in the NFL. And Jaden Daniels has the makings of a quarterback who can kind of mitigate good defensive advantages just by virtue of his ability to scramble, which he's doing a lot more often, and creating. I mean, we saw that on his touchdown throw to McLaurin, where he's dancing around the pocket, creating for 6 seconds. Like, that's precisely the sorts of plays that a quarterback like Daniels can do to mitigate a defense. All that is to say, counting for home field advantage, 4.5 points is a lot, I think, to a team that generates so much of its value from kind of like controlling the clock, winning on defense, and not their passing game. And these are just naturally fragile, right? Like, you need to continue to sustain drives, and the Eagles are not generating a lot of explosive plays. They really have one recipe for success, and it's worked. And like, it's difficult to kind of see the other side because we haven't seen it recently, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And we are dealing with a very small sample of games, which is just to say, I think the 4.5 points is a lot. And kind of when I think about the pathways of this game playing out, like, the Commanders can have success against anyone, even though the Eagles defense has been great. And so much of the market value on the Eagles is from their defense and from this running game. And that's a naturally fragile way to win. I think the Commanders are undervalued, given Jaden Daniels is going to be back at full strength. And I think even just beyond this game, I think the Commanders can make some noise.
Okay, keep an eye on the Commanders too. And Judah, is it a tails one for you? I know it's a lean, not a bet yet, but
yes, it's certainly a tails one for me. I think it's kind of like if this one goes right, it's really going to go right, and they're going to be able to move the ball on Philly and generate enough disruption on defense where, like, the Eagles are not going to have a lot of success. They have barely had any games of just like pure drop back success. So this would be a spot, yes, that I'd be looking on the alts here.
Okay, look at the alts. They're starting with the money line, I guess, at 254. Doug, I'll be honest, I came into sort of looking at that game, probably thinking Eagles. Judah's made some good points on particularly Jaden Daniels and getting better each week with a little bit of injury he was carrying. Make the case the opposite way for the Eagles.
No, I certainly understand it. And 4.5 and 4 was too high. That's why the market got crashed to 3. And that's the right number when you factor in that this line was 4.5 in favor of Philly at home just about a month ago or so. And I do think Daniels is healthier and things like that. Some of that is opponent based. The fact that they've got right in some games, this still sort of feels like a typical Kingsbury season where the team fades down the stretch and gets worse. Like and Daniels is not quite the dynamic. Now, he had a good game, and his offensive player of the year market has now shot back up to the minus 1,500 range. But I think Philly sort of is complete team, and they're doing it with their quarterback playing okay. That's what's sort of kind of funny about all this. And the Commanders have every opportunity to win this game, but it's hard to go against this team that's won 10 straight and seems to sort of counter whatever the opposing team is doing to them and do it the right way. I think they know what's at stake here. It's a big game. I think they go ahead and win this one and cover the 3.
Okay, lean for Eagles and leans for Washington on the tails. That is for Judah as well. Again, another debatable game, could go either way. Hopefully it swayed you one way or another if you are looking for a bet and had some inkling listening to that. Vikings at Seahawks is next. We'll take a look at the betting that we currently have on matchbook.com. The money line sees Vikings 162 fabs against the Seahawks, who are 248. The point spread sees Vikings laying 3 on the road in Seattle at 193, and the total currently stands at 42.5, overs at 194. Doug, throw this back at you. I mean, we just spoke about the Vikings at the top of the show. I mean, the Seattle bubble seemed to burst in a big game there when it really mattered against the Packers. Is it danger then to overstate that performance, or was it just a worrying sign that maybe they're not quite at the level that Minnesota can continue their great run. I think there's 7 wins in a row right now.
Yeah. And this is more for me, it's like a market play, right? Geno Smith, we don't know if he's going to play, pretty banged up. Sam Howell drop off, and the Vikings pressure, right? The Vikings pressure, we saw what it did to Caleb Williams, even as a guy who's getting the root of the ball more quickly than into the new OC. And I think this is a market grab. You have to do it. Now, if Geno is in, the number probably goes lower than 3, but not by much. He's not going to be 100%, 2.5. The Vikings team that's been underrated, perform well against the spread. But if he's out and it's Sam Howell, now it's Sam Howell with a full week of practice, not Sam Howell mid-game. That's important to establish for people who, I joked, I think, in a recent podcast, I was like, just because they're down a guy doesn't mean they're playing with 10 on the field, right? Like, they're going to be prepared. They're going to put Sam Howell in positions to succeed. But I just think it's a much more limited playbook, especially against the pressure that Minnesota brings. So I think there's some great line value here because I don't know, what's the high side if Geno's ruled out? 5.5, 6 maybe. I mean, I don't know. Probably 5.5. But I think with 3 being such a key number, you can get some line value and play out of it and use it to your advantage and build your portfolio. If it's on the bad side and Geno plays, how comfortable are you with this Seahawks team that's struggled against pressure and all this stuff with a banged up Geno Smith? Who knows? Now, the Vikings are on a short week. You never want to overreact to what you last saw. They obviously look like world beaters at home against the Bears. This is going to be a much different environment, much different situation. It's still Sam Darnold. Like, you got to be careful a little bit. But I think they're just too much firepower, and they're on a roll for a reason.
Okay, Vikings at the time recording, that is Wednesday afternoon, -3 at 193. Unsure, obviously, if Geno goes or not. Judah, were you tempted at all with Vikings -3 before ending up on a total bet here?
I think there's too much injury uncertainty for me, and I have no idea his health here. The only time I'm comfortable really looking at the health stuff is, as I said with Jaden Daniels, when I see a clear difference in how a player, his style has changed. Right, like Justin Herbert to me is not a guy at full strength. He stopped scrambling. He was scrambling 12% of the time, and then he stopped. That is a sign to me of, or even if it's not the injury, whatever it is, something that has changed in his style of play. That's going to be a kind of how I determine the injury side of things. Yeah, I like the under because I think it. I'm just working under the assumption of, and obviously the total's also going to change if Geno Smith is in, but I guess it's almost tracking wherever the market's going. This is obviously a bad number to bet if Geno Smith is in, but I think this does play to the under, where given the current probabilities of, I'm trusting the market here and knowing Geno Smith's a likelihood of playing, and I think this is a Minnesota offense that is going to put up a ton of points in spots where they're going up against defenses that struggle to generate pressure, that struggle to kind of generate general disruption via good coverage or not. And Sam Darnold has the most drastic splits of anyone, whether or not a defense is disrupting a play or not. And Seattle's defense has been great. And I'm willing to, yes, they had a somewhat poor game. I mean, in the second half of the game, the Packers still could not move the ball very well. I don't think that, that was a poor performance, but I'm not saying the Seahawks defense is quite bad. And I think it's a completely different matchup against a Vikings team that has struggled in spots against better defenses, right? This is not, I think, as matchup agnostic a team as the Packers are. And this is a defense which has been, since they've gotten healthy and post-bye, top 5 in basically every metric you can think of. And Sam Darnold and the Vikings are very, very sensitive to that. I think this is a spot where, especially if Sam Howell's going, Seattle's going to try and grind the game via the run. That's not exactly a strategy that has worked against the Vikings, considering how good they've been against the run. But that's the sort of thing which leads to plenty of 3-and-outs and punts. And punts are the best friend of an under. I think this is a spot where both teams can kind of stall out a whole bunch.
Okay, low number, but Judah strongly, I was saying the 42.5 at the time of recording. We'll follow the market, obviously, seeing where that ends up. And Vikings -3, the selection for Doug at 193.
Would you bet that now? knowing the potential movement in either direction of the quarterback news surrounding Geno?
Yeah, I feel like I trust the market probability of Smith in, and it's like a spot where we'll see how the market reacts. If it's, I don't know, like I have absolutely no clue what Geno Smith's injury situation is like, but I'm willing to trust the market's probability here, and I think like you're taking a gamble in some way, so it's generally not my style of bet. In terms of like, I don't like to bet on injury news, but I still think it is worthwhile. Even I don't think you're getting killed if Geno Smith's in. That's a better way of putting it. And I think it's asymmetric to the other side.
Okay, if you're listening Wednesday or even Thursday, Friday, but ahead of the game, lean 42.5. You can take that now. Same with the Vikings -3 because that is the bet and the prices at time of recording here. Let's move on. Niners at the Dolphins. Niners on the money line, 2.08. Dolphins are 187 favorites in Miami. Niners getting a 1.5 head start, and 45 is the total. 198 is the over-unders, and 194. We'll get to the total in a second. I want to start on the money line or maybe the point spread, depending which way you want to play it, Doug. But you're strong here, I'm guessing, on the Niners.
Yeah, I don't think much of this Dolphins team. Look, Tua has his limitations. He can only throw the ball around the line of scrimmage and a little bit downfield, but not much, unless they go over the middle. But still, he's just so limited in a lot of ways. And I've not been impressed with Miami. Not that the Niners have been world beaters and they're hanging on by a thin line. But, got the extra rest. I think they go there and take care of business. I like a little bit that it's a later game for whatever, those people think the West Coast on the early time slot. I just don't like this Dolphins team. I think they're shaky across the board, and Miami's just a little less. Sorry, San Francisco is just a little less shakier.
Okay, and Doug or Judo, would you concur with that? So the Niners 2.1, you're leaving that and going for the total here. I'm guessing you like both matchups on the offenses versus defenses here, and as Doug alluded to, their Niners sort of hanging on for dear life on their playoff hopes.
Yeah, I mean, like I certainly don't think motivation's a problem right now. Both teams are going to be playing. Yet this is an extremely low total for two offenses that have been at the very top of the league for numerous years, and this year too, from an efficiency standpoint. And it's not like these are killer defenses. They're both teams that have extremely high drive success rates. That is the Dolphins with Tua Tagovailoa. I think this total is just too low in the context of 2024, given the state of the offenses and defenses. Also, this is not like a game in. There's no crazy weather, at least not that I'm aware of, where it's like, 25 mile per hour winds and 30 degrees and freezing rain. Like, this is Miami. It's not going to be crazy. That I don't know. It's almost like the midwit meme, I think, of just like good offenses, not great defenses, or just like fine defenses, below average total. I'm just like, I'm gonna play that side. Maybe I'm just on the left of the midwit meme here.
But just before we go to any other bets, so the 45 is Niners Dolphins. Well, what was that at its peak over the last, say, 3 years with these two offenses?
It could be.
What could it have been?
50.5, 52.
Yeah,
right, like
touchdown in it, at least.
This game was played at this time last season. Granted, these are obviously different teams, but like if this was played in week 2, what's the total here? I don't know. I think this total is off, but maybe I'm the left tail of the, as I said, the left tail of the midway game.
Okay, well, we'll lock it in. 45.0 over 198. Doug on the Niners and moneyline 2.1, or you can take the 1.5 for security ish. That is at 197. Any other bets? Doug's going to hit us with 3 here, so take it away, Doug. I'll let you lead. I mean, the Packers so impressive against Seattle to start it. We've seen teams take on big handicaps only last week and do it. The Ravens. I mean, I tend to avoid those big handicaps when you see them come in and then they just cruise the rest of the game. You just think to yourself, I mean, that was just the bet, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong to avoid them, right?
No,
there's a reason these numbers get to a point. It's the backdoor cover. The backdoor is wide open for the Ravens and Giants. I just think it's a horrendous situation for the Saints. Like, their defense is terrible. Alvin Kamara is battling a growing injury. Possible snow in the game. It's an indoor team. I think the Packers are on the incline in terms of just how they've looked and are improving. I mean, I can't believe this is the Monday night game. I think we're looking at like 31-6 or something, just beat down. Like, I don't know. Spencer Rattler's famous last. I like Tainer. Not good. Rattler is okay, but this is a much different ask to go outdoors and things like that. I don't know. I guess the Saints will put up a fight because they're professionals and they play for unguaranteed contracts and it's Monday Night Football. But man, the Packers should just run the ball down their throat, and then if there's any pressure, Love is really good under pressure. He backpedals and does the Rodgers thing. This could be a disaster for this New Orleans team. Again, snow home team. It's not looking pretty.
Yeah, that's the Saints at the Packers. Packers laying minus 14 at 196, and Lions Bears over 48.0.
Well, it's pretty obvious. The Lions defense has been ravaged, and the Bears are getting scorched on defense as well. So do the math, and I think the Lions cannot put the pressure on Caleb Williams that we just saw the Vikings do on Monday night. The Chicago defense has been deteriorating, and I think the Bears might be a little live in this game, and it's Jared Goff in cold weather. So that does concern me a little bit on the over because he stinks, but they have ways to work around it. And maybe it's turnovers and short fields and everything. So I do like the over, but I also like the Bears in that game too. I think the Bears plus 6.5 is too many points for sure.
Okay, fine. Any other bets then? First half bet Cardinals at the Panthers. I mean, first half over 23.5. I love it.
Yeah. So I've talked about this a couple times this year. The Panthers' first halves have been just going over every game because they stunk on offense. They have short field, things like that. And the teams come in just licking their chops against the defense. I also think the matchup really favors them. Now, I was doing a deep dive, reading a bunch, also listening to podcasts. I'm going to mooch this, but basically just the defense is there's zero pass rush for Carolina. And Judah can probably speak to this, just how feeble the Carolina pass rush is and what it does. And it's a kryptonite to every quarterback. We know that. But really, some of these quarterbacks who are really limited, like Kyler Murray, can't see over the line and stuff like this. I think he's just going to have a field day. It's going to be a breakout game for the Cardinals. And the Panthers, like, not that Bryce Young has solved all his issues, but I think this is going to be a much easier game for him than he's faced the last few weeks. He was under pressure from the first snap against Dallas last week, Philly, KC, and Tampa. I don't think Arizona applies much pressure. So I think this is going to be a little bit of a track meet with both quarterbacks being able to sling it around. I think 23.5 is a good number, like a football number for the first half. Both teams will be pressing. There won't be one side leading too much. Excuse me. So I think it's one of those things where in case Arizona gets out big, they'll take their foot off the gas. I like the first half more.
Okay, first half over 23.5, 194, over 48 lines at Bears at 204, and Packers laying 14 at home against the Saints 196. Long shot time. Jude, I want to lead into this bet just on the numbers handicaps. Is there any rule you have, like if it's 2 touchdowns or more, you stay away from the game, or is it just a bet is bet? A bet is a bet, and that's the end of it, well, no matter what the line is.
I think it's kind of team dependent, right? Like certain teams are built to win with more margin than others, right? If you're going to score a lot of points, or you have a defense that, like, for whatever reason in that game, you think can really limit a team to like one touchdown or fewer. I think that's kind of what determines the depth, I guess, of the long shot. And then obviously you have to look at kind of what the market is pricing as well. This one I'm going Tampa minus 9.5. Talked about it last week. I think that was the best bet last week, if I remember correctly, on the them against the Chargers. And this is a team that I think is underrated relative to market. This is an offense that's been great, can score points on anyone, and I think Dallas is in just a completely different tier. Since Cooper Rush took over as quarterback, this has been one of the worst offenses in football. They've got the ground game going, but I think that stops against Tampa Bay, who's been one of the best run defenses in the league since Vita Vea got back. They've been incredible there. And when you're forcing Cooper Rush to drop back to pass, it's just, I think we're going to see what Cooper Rush looked like the first couple of weeks before. I mean, he's been back the whole time. I shouldn't say that. It's the Dallas offense, I think, is going to look a lot more like the putrid unit that they were before Rico Dowdle was running for 120 yards a game, because this is just not the same matchup against the Bucs. And I mean, Baker Mayfield's done extremely well with quick pressure. The Bucs have kind of designed their offense to mitigate that. They've seen kind of the least amount of quick pressure. This is a team that I think all angles point to them as being a spot where they can win with some pretty big margin.
Okay, that's Bucks lane -9.5. You can't get that on the alt line, so you can't get best price on those alternative handicaps on Matchbook 3.1. You can use the bet builder to find those alternative handicaps as well if you want to combine it with something else on Matchbook. Doug, it seems every week I look into the long shot sections and Bears money line is put up.
Well, I think look, they're at home. Remember, go back to Thanksgiving. A lot of money coming in on the Bears, plus the 10.5, moved it to 9.5, things like that. And then now it's at Soldier Field. And Goff has historically been terrible in cold weather. The defense just ravaged with injuries. Like, it's not that crazy of a stretch for Chicago to actually deliver. Now, the coaching issue has been a little bit of a mess, but I do think Williams is playing a little better. And I just think the Lions are vulnerable, especially with Goff in cold weather. So I would look at the Bears money line. And I have a bonus one. You talked about the long spreads. I do think the Bills, you talked about ripe for an upset, things like that, like just or flat spot, I should say. 14.5. 14 is a big number. I like the Patriots plus 10.5. They play hard to the final whistle, and it's cold weather expected. This could be a 20-10 game very easily. And Buffalo just coming off monster games, the back-to-back road games. Now they're home. They're coming off the monster win. They're now the Super Bowl favorites. I just wonder what's left in the tank. Look, they have easy schedule left. They have 2 with the Patriots, 1 with the Jets. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But this could be a game where they sort of play with their food a little bit. Remember, there was a Sunday game last year where the Giants, I believe, almost beat them with Tyrod Taylor on the final play, where they did a jump pass in the back of the end zone. I'm not saying it's going to come down to that, but I think the Patriots beat them last year or 2 years ago as well in Foxborough. New England has a way of making these games a little bit more competitive than you think. I thought they were a little bit more competitive against Arizona than the score indicated, and could have backdoored maybe even at the end. I think 14's too big, so I think 10.5 would be a bonus long shot.
Okay, bonus long shot there. So Bucks -9.5 for Judah at the Cowboys. Bears money line hosting the Lions at 365, and for fun, we'll throw in Patriots plus 10.5 against the Bills. It is set up for a backdoor cover, isn't it? That game, it will go down to the final play. That game, one way or another. Everyone's who bet on that game wondering why they did and why it's come down to this. Always away with those big handicaps, but we got a couple of big handicaps to cover in our best bets. Judah, the Cincinnati Bengals still firing on offensively most of the time. Anyway, a -7.5 against the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting Dorian Thompson-Robinson in this spot, and I mean, the Bengals defense has been atrocious all season. I don't think that Dorian Thompson-Robinson behind the bottom offensive line with like no real weapons is a threat to take advantage of that. He's been dreadful in all games he's played so far in the NFL. I think they're going to struggle to score points, and the Bengals week in and week out, they're scoring points has not been their problem. And I don't see why that is going to stop this week against a Browns defense, which for most of the season had generated a lot of pressure, and that was like almost their saving grace. They traded Zadarius Smith over the last 5 weeks of the season, 6 weeks, whatever. I'm not like anchoring to one point. It's going to be true of the shorter term sample, which I think is more indicative. Like, this is a team that's bottom 10 in quick pressure rate and pressure rate. They've allowed the most explosive plays of anyone in the NFL. They play a ton of single high, which is just a disaster when you don't have the corners to win one-on-one matchups. And like, Denzel Ward's a solid corner, but they don't have guys to match up with both of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And I think this is a spot where the Bengals are going to have a lot of offensive success, and I just do not think that Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to be able to take advantage of kind of where the market is pricing the Bengals this week, which is their defense.
Okay, yeah, serious man of scores put up offensively the Bengals, so if they can stop that Browns offense, -7.5 could look very small come Sunday, 197. And Doug, finally to you. I mean, the Falcons laying a big number at 8.5, just given their scoring struggles over the last few weeks. But I guess the Giants it's maybe an anti-Giants pro Falcons, or a bit of both. Just like the matchup.
It's a little bit of both with the new quarterback, Michael Penix.
Yes.
I think, I don't have the stat in front of me, but historically, when quarterbacks, rookies, make their first start at home, they actually are pretty good against the spread, whereas on the road, they're not. Giants stink, although I will say, as someone who faded them last week, I was a little uneasy with DeVito's connection and progress with Neighbors. So that does concern me. But I really think Penix just opens the playbook for the Falcons. Just his threat to run, he'll do it. There's no game film for the Giants. Not that they would do anything appropriate with it. They have no passer. Like, they're just not they're a horrendous defense, although the corners are okay. I just think Penix and those weapons are going to have a field day against the Giants. And there's a chance it's lock, but I think they're going to stick with DeVito. The Screams teaser, I think the offense I think the team's going to have a boost of like positivity with Penix. I think it's a lot of speculation, but I really do. Sometimes it's better to dumb it down and just go with your best stuff. And it's not like the Giants are going to put up much resistance. I think the Falcons are going to be just fine with the rookie QB at home. I mean, that's the key here. And they should open up a can on this Giants defense.
Okay, our best bets: Falcons -8.5 and Bengals -7.5. Let's see where we are come Sunday. My thanks to Judah and Doug. InsideStatMatchbook.com, full recap of the NFL picks, football, and horse racing will be there too. And do check out our YouTube channel. Turn notifications on so you don't miss an episode. We're hoping to get one more in before Christmas, so do keep an eye on your podcast feeds on the 23rd. But until then, enjoy this Sunday's NFL football. Bye bye.